You're listening to News New Mexico, where it is understood that whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a courageous decision.
Launch Control, this is Houston. We are go for launch.
Hold on to your lug nuts. It's time for an overhaul.
Turn it up some.
I'm your huckleberry. I don't give jobs, I hire men. You won't give me anything, and I won't give you anything.
Collision, sir.
Whoa, relax. We're not even moving.
There's no crying in baseball.
We are News New Mexico. It's Wednesday, December 21st, 2011. Jim Spence is in studio. I'm Michael Swickard. We have Rachel Pulaski in studio also. Jerry Harden is our producer-director. Kyle Doborowski is the executive producer of News New Mexico. You can go to newsnm.com and follow along on our Newsmaker line. We have Marita Noon. Energy makes America great. Org. We always get her to say org. Just so you know.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you letting me draw attention to that.
Yeah, it's org, as in organization. Energy makes America great. You have a column out in which you have this line. Even the environmentalists acknowledge they need a new approach. Marita, don't wake them up.
Let them keep going down the same old
That's
bad
it.
path,
You know, right now we've had 25 hours of I-25 frozen shut, slammed, everybody stopped, and you got the global warming protesters out there saying we really need to somehow cut our carbon footprint down a little so we can get the planet to cool off a little.
Yeah, I had 12 inches of snow yesterday, and as I was out there shoveling, or was it the day before? I guess it was the day before I had 12 inches of snow. But anyway, as I was out there shoveling it, I was praying for global warming.
Absolutely. So what about this? You want the environment? You have a column, just for people to know. We posted it on newsnm.com. It's on townhall.com. Saving the Climate Change Circus.
Yes, and that's based on what happened in Durban, and it's interesting, very few people even have a clue that a week or two ago now, for a couple of weeks, in Durban, South Africa. First off,
South
most people
Africa.
don't even know where Durban is, let alone know what took place in Durban. But thousands of climate change believers, man-made climate change believers, and I need to emphasize that because certainly the climate does change and it will continue to change regardless of what human beings have done. But the climate was changing long before human beings were on the planet, and so it's pretty clear that human beings had little to do with it. But those who believe that if we reduce out the burning of fossil fuels, we will be able to save the planet, gathered in Durban, South Africa for the UN climate change, the 17th annual.
Can we at least compliment them on one thing? It is summer in Durban, South Africa right now. Warm.
Yes.
That when they hold those meetings in Norway, in the depth of winter, and all the protesters get frostbit talking about global warming, I think they're looking stupid. At least they're smart enough to hold their climate change, even though it's December in North America. It's December there too. Yes.
And they were in Cancun last year. And as you said, they were in Copenhagen.
Copenhagen was not
where
good.
They had a big freeze. And even in Cancun, they had one of the coldest, Decembers on record in Cancun. Next year, they're going to be in Qatar.
Where?
Qatar.
Oh,
Qatar?
yeah, Qatar.
Qatar.
Yeah.
We call it Qatar.
It just depends on whether...
But a lot of people call it Qatar.
It depends on whether or not Iran will let them into the Gulf of Hormuz, huh? Because they've been...
That's right. But that's where they'll be next year. So, as you know, 2 weeks ago, my column was on China's role there at the conference, and that because China has continually resisted participating in global climate-binding carbon emission talks. They've repeatedly said, no, we won't play. But at this last conference, COP17, in Durban, China kind of changed their tune a bit. and implied like, well, maybe we could go along with this whole thing. And, of course, that was just a strategy because China is the leader in solar panels in the world.
So they said
this entire climate change thing, then the motivation for solar panels disappears.
So they said that
China
they will
needs to keep that alive.
They will pay to play then, huh? At that point.
Well, they're not really going to pay. They're just going to talk about it, because if China again says no way, no how, we're not going to do this, everybody knows there's no deal down the road, because you've got to have the big emitters on board for this plan, this scheme to work. Europe has enacted a cap and trade program, and if you follow, just like you might follow the price of silver or the price of gold, the price of carbon has gone nowhere. I mean, it's dropped totally. It has gone somewhere, because when the carbon markets opened, it started at a like, let's say, I don't honestly know the price in my head, but let's say it started at $50 a ton, and it's now down to, let's say, $3 a ton. So it has gone somewhere. It just hasn't been anywhere good for the markets. So they need to try to prop this thing up. And that's what they do every year. They go to the Climate Change Conference of Parties, COP, the Conference of Parties, and try to somehow, again, come up with a deal. Well, they didn't come up with a deal this year, and then right after the conference was over, Canada announced, we're not going to play anymore. Even though we were one of the very first signers to the Kyoto Treaty, we realized how many millions of dollars it is going to cost us to stay in this deal. So Canada dropped out.
Well, it's $14 billion, right?
Signed on.
Marita, it's $14 billion was what it was going to cost the Canadians to stay in the Church of Man-Made Climate Change. And so I think what you had with Canada is they just rejected the primary scripture of the Church of Man-Made Climate Change, didn't they?
Yes.
I mean, they're blasphemers, aren't they?
Did.
Denying blasphemers from Canada now.
But the interesting thing is, when you study the reports out of Durban, and of course I was not in Durban, but I followed what took place there. When you study it, only Europe has hung in there.
Well, only Europe. And we will talk with Marita Noon about what Europe is doing. Energy Makes America Great is the website.org. We'll be right back.
Now listen here. You give up that silly peanuts, Dan, and I'll get you a soft government job. Now, let's see. How would you like a job in the mint?
Mint? No. I don't like a mint. What other flavor you got?
We are News New Mexico. What we have here is a failure to communicate sometimes. We are News New Mexico. Jim Spence here. I'm Michael Swickard. Rachel Pulaski's here. We're talking with Marita Noon. EnergyMakesAmericaGreat.org is the website. Marita, so Canada drops out. What effect does that have?
Well, it essentially kills any hope of ever receiving a global deal for those who believe that that's something that we need. But the interesting thing, as we said before the break, is that when you study the reports, as I've done, you see that of the so-called wealthy countries, of which Canada, the United States, and Europe considered a country as the EU, they're the only one that's still really pushing for this is Europe. Now, Australia is still on board, but they aren't leading the charge as Europe is. So you kind of have to wonder, okay, when everybody else seems to have seen the light and is realized as a result of ClimateGate 1, which was a year ago December, or 2 years ago, just before Copenhagen, we had all the release of all these emails that came out of Europe, that came out of East Anglica, that were showing how they were kind of hiding or falsifying data, that there was some hanky-panky going on with the data, that anything that didn't prove their premise was kind of hidden. And then you realize that the Nobel Peace Prize for Al Gore, for example, for his work on climate change, that came out of Europe, and you realize that Europe seems to be a real driver in pushing this idea of man-made climate change. And you kind of have to wonder, well, wait a minute, why are they pushing so hard for man-made climate change interventions to do something like a Kyoto Treaty that they perceive will save the Earth?
Do you have a theory?
Of course I have a theory, and that's what's outlined in the article, and realize it is only a theory, but when you connect the dots, it most certainly does seem to line up that way. And you look at it, and for example, Europe as a whole does not have a lot of natural resources. They do not have a lot of or historically have not had a lot of natural gas. I say historically because now through fracking technique, they are discovering that up in northern Europe there is some natural gas. But when you look at World War II and some of the causes for it, a lot of it was about trying to get natural resources. Germany was trying to get into the oil fields of Russia because they needed that natural resource. Now, Southern Europe, however, has really no natural resources such as oil and gas. And when you look at Italy's their trade balance, if you could pull oil that they import out of the trade balance, Italy's actually in fairly good shape as far as that is concerned. So the only way that Europe can really become energy independent and not have to depend on Russia, you may recall a few years ago, Russia shut off the natural gas to the country of Georgia in a way to control them and get them back under their thumb. Well, Europe is scared to death of Russia doing that again. The Middle East controls the oil that Europe uses, and so the only way for Europe to be energy independent is through wind and solar. But wind and solar is more expensive.
It's like times 5, times 7. Now, we're going to go to a break here. What was it that ClimateGate showed us? It showed that those scientists were data dredging, meaning they were looking for the answer before they started theoretically looking. They were withholding conflicting data, and they were changing data to fit what they wanted. Yep, that was pretty bad. We are News New Mexico. More in a minute.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
That's the way most Americans are. We have Marita Noon, EnergyMakesAmericaGreat.org, on our Newsmaker line.
So, Marita, I'm thinking back to your wonderful book, Energy Freedom, and how you kind of spell out all the things that oil goes into, like plastics, things that make your computers, make your smartphones. What do you think the young generation would think if we were to just terminate the manufacture of all smartphones and laptop computers because we wanted to be green?
Well, first, I don't think they think there's any connection to those items and being green. I don't know if you were watching on the Occupy Wall Street information there when they were showing when everybody was in New York. They had to do a raid on the little encampment for fire danger, and they removed out of there gasoline-powered generators. So, even there they realized that, you know what, we need energy, that their iPads and their iPhones, etc., couldn't be charged on the sun or couldn't be charged out of nowhere, and they had to have energy. So, and they don't even think about that.
What about the preachers in this man-made climate change movement? Which I believe is a church more than anything else. And what are they preaching in those pulpits on this concept? Are they telling people, well, yeah, you can use your smartphone and your laptop computer and all other types of plastics, but you really need to feel guilty about it?
Well, they don't say it quite that bluntly, but that's certainly the meta message that is hidden within that, is that they want everybody to believe, oh, well, we can power the world on wind and solar. There is some acknowledgement that power is needed, but we can get it from wind and solar. But, of course, when you look at the power density, the land use, the cost, all of those things, it just totally doesn't work. One of the things I like to say is, if we were in a different economic and political time and place, perhaps it would be wise to be making some investments in alternative, intermittent, supplemental kinds of energy. But right now, where our focus needs to be is on getting this economy back on track. And in order to do that, we need stability and an awareness that we are going to have available, abundant, and affordable energy. And as I mentioned in the column, Europe is pushing the renewables because if they're going to have to use more expensive energy, it puts them at a competitive disadvantage with their primary competition, which is America.
Now, Marita, I have a little note that the federal gas credit expiration is coming, that the ethanol excise tax is set up to expire in another week or so. What's that going to do if all of a sudden ethanol doesn't have a big tax credit on it?
Well, it will definitely reduce its funding. When I was in Las Cruces a few weeks back, and I was speaking for the group, the Women Involved in Farm Economics, they had a gentleman there who was from the lobby, the ethanol lobby. They've sort of acknowledged that they've lost that particular battle, that the subsidies are going to expire, the benefits are going to expire, but they've already got it mandated now into gasoline. Most gasoline contains up to 10% ethanol, and they've already got it mandated into gasoline. So while they are disappointed that the subsidy is going to expire, they don't see that it's going to make a huge difference because ethanol is such a small portion of a gallon of gas. It won't probably make a huge difference to our bottom line, the consumer's pocket.
Marita Noon, EnergyMakesAmericaGreat.org. Thank you so much for what you do, Marita.
Always a pleasure to chat with you all.
All right.